Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Radha Govardhan Dari, Radha Govardhan Dari, Shri Radhe. Jai Radha Damodar, Radha Damodar, Shri Radhe. Jaya Krishna Balaram, Jaya Giri Govardhan, Jaya Krishna Balaram, Jaya Giri Govardhan. Giri Govardhan, Jaya Balaram, Jaya Giri Govardhan. Jaya Gauranitai, 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 Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Paramahamsa Prabhupada Srila His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai, Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda ki jai, Ganga Devi ki jai, Yamuna Devi ki jai, Bhakti Devi Tulsi Devi Maharani ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Sri Prabhupada. Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavrinda.
Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktavrinda.
Hare Krishna, I ask the blessings from all the devotees that I can speak something, repeat what I have heard from Srila Prabhupada and his followers, and that it may be beneficial to myself and to all of us. So today we're reading from Caitanya Caritamrita, Adi Lila, chapter 7, 116. Ishvarera tattvayena jvalita jvalana Jivera swarupayaiche spulingera kana Ishvarera tattvayena jvalita jvalana Jivera swarupayaiche spulingera kana Ishvarera Tattva, the truth of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yena is like, Jvalita, blazing, Jvalana, fire, Jivera, of the living entities, Swarupa, identity, Yaiche is like, Spulingera, of the spark, Kana, particle. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The Lord is like a great blazing fire, and the living entities are like small sparks of that fire. Please repeat. The Lord is like a great blazing fire, and the living entities are like small sparks of that fire. Although sparks and a big fire are both fire and both have the power to burn, the burning power of the fire and that of the spark are not the same. Why should one artificially try to become like a big fire, although by constitution he is like a small spark? It is due to ignorance. One should therefore understand that neither the Supreme Personality of Godhead nor the small spark like living entities have anything to do with matter. But when the spiritual spark comes in contact with the material world, his fiery quality is extinguished. That is the position of the conditioned souls. Because they are in touch with the material world, their spiritual quality is almost dead. But because these spiritual sparks are all Krishna's parts and parcels, as the Lord states in Bhagavad Gita, Mamai Vamsha, they can revive their original position by getting free from material contact. This is pure philosophical understanding. In Bhagavad Gita, the spiritual sparks are declared to be Sanatan, eternal. Therefore, the material energy, Maya, cannot affect their constitutional position. Someone may argue, why is there a need to create the spiritual sparks? The answer can be given in this way. Since the absolute personality of Godhead is omnipotent, he has both unlimited and limited potencies. This is the meaning of omnipotent. To be omnipotent, he must have not only unlimited potencies, but limited potencies also. Thus, to exhibit his omnipotency, he displays both. The living entities are endowed with limited potency, although they are part of the Lord. The Lord displays the spiritual world by his unlimited potencies, whereas by his limited potencies the material world is displayed. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says, Aparayam itastva anyam prakritim vidhi me param jiva bhutam mahabaho yayedam dharyate jagat. Besides the inferior nature, O mighty armed Arjuna, there is a superior energy of mind, which is all living entities who are struggling with material nature and are sustaining the universe. Bhagavad Gita 75. The Jiva Bhuta, living entities, control this material world with their limited potencies. Generally, people are bewildered by the activities of scientists and technologists. Due to Maya, they think that there is no need of God and that they can do everything and anything, but actually they cannot. Since this cosmic manifestation is limited, their existence is also limited. Everything in this material world is limited, And for this reason there is creation, sustenance and dissolution. However, in the material world of unlimited energy, the spiritual world, there is neither creation nor destruction. If the personality of Godhead did not possess both limited and unlimited energies, he could not be called omnipotent. Mahato Mahiyam, Anuto Aniyam. He is greater than the greatest and smaller than the smallest. He is smaller than the smallest in the form of the living entities and greater than the greatest in his form of Krishna. If there were no one to control, there would be no meaning to the conception of the supreme controller, Ishvara. Just as there is no meaning to a king without his subjects. If all the subjects became king, there would be no distinction between the king and an ordinary citizen. Thus, for the Lord to be the supreme controller, there must be a creation to control. The basic principle for the existence of the living entities is called Chida Vilas, or spiritual pleasure. The omnipotent Lord displays his pleasure potency as the living entities. The Lord is described in the Vedanta Sutra as Ananda Mayo Vyasat. He is by nature the reservoir of all pleasures, and because he wants to enjoy pleasure, there must be energies to give him pleasure or supply him the impetus for pleasure. That is the perfect philosophical understanding of the absolute truth. Jai Shri Prabhupada, Shri Prabhupada ki Jai. Namo Krishna Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati P. Krishna Goswami Niti Namine. Namo Krishna Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauranga Namine Shukshashuni Namaste. Hare Krishna. I apologize, I prepared for the wrong verse, but I'll try to speak on what I have heard from Srila Prabhupada and what I have read and from his followers and grand followers. So here it says that we, the living entities, are spiritual sparks of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Krishna is compared to the fire. So we as spiritual sparks, a spark is very tiny. And when there's, for example, a bonfire, we are sitting around a bonfire and a spark falls out of that fire, that spark dwindles and dries up and becomes blackish. So when we are separated from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, then when we're trying to enjoy separately from Krishna, then we become dry and there's no substance in our life. So anything we do in our life, we can continue doing everything we're doing, working in the world, studying, because we have this material body, so we still need to function in the material world. But at the same time, we need to connect it with God, with Krishna. Then there is some purpose in life. Otherwise, we hear from the text, the spiritual text, Bhagavad Gita, where it says that those who are very pious, who do many good deeds, they eventually go to the higher planets to enjoy, because just like in the material world, if someone is working and as an employee and they work very hard, then they get a bonus at the end of the year, or Christmas bonus, and then they enjoy and celebrate, and then that money gets finished in the next year, then they work again. So similarly, someone who is pious and doing good deeds, they go to the heavenly planet to enjoy, just like someone goes on vacation to Hawaii and uses up their money, and then they have to come back and work. So we fall down back into the material world, but because they have been pious, they take birth in families that are wealthy, or if they haven't fully completed the spiritual path, they are fortunate enough to take birth in families of devotees of the Lord, where they can continue on in their spiritual practice. And then ultimately, once we get fully purified, then we can go back home to the spiritual world. So we see in these paintings up here, there's descriptions of the spiritual world described in the scriptures of, it's not just a puff of smoke or some air, like sometimes some people believe. There's the material world is compared to when you go to a lakeside and there's a big tree, and then you look on the lake and the tree appears to be upside down. So the roots appear to be upwards, and the branches and the trunk, they appear to be down. So whatever is in the material world is, whatever is in the spiritual world is reflected in the material world, but it's perverted. Just like in the water, the tree is perverted. It's not exactly how it is in the spiritual world. So like that, in the material world, we're trying to enjoy separately from Krishna, but there is enjoyment in the spiritual world. There's relationships, there's love, there's service, because the nature of a soul is service, servitude. Just like the nature of sugar is sweetness. You can't separate sweetness and sugar, because then it's not sugar. And also, just like the nature of fire is that it gives warmth and light. So if there's no warmth and light in fire, then it's not fire. So each individual living entity in the material world, or any living entity, whether we in a higher sense enjoyment place, like in the material world we can compare to Hawaii, but there are other planets that we may not conceive of, but it is described in the Vedic text that they are higher planets, that people are gradually, some people are aiming for that. But we want to go back to Krishna Loka or Goloka Vrindavan, and that place is beyond this material sky. And in that place, the difference between material world and spiritual world is that in the material world, we all experience it, or we've observed it, or we're going to experience it. There's always birth, death, old age and disease. No one can escape it. Even the greatest person, like we see the king, or like in England, they have the king and queen. They may live very opulently, they may have doctors and things like that, but they also get sick, and they also get old, and they're also going to die. So we can't escape that. But when we go to the spiritual world, the nature of the spiritual world is Sat, Chid, Ananda. So it's eternal, Sat, and Chid, it's all knowledge, and Ananda, there's all bliss there. So there's relationships there. It's not that we all merge into oneness. There is a stage where some people aim for that. It's called the Brahma Jyoti, the big light, but there is something beyond that. Just like when we look at the sun, from our vision we may see the sun planet, but then when you go closer, like the example Prabhupada gives is like a train. From far away in the village in India, they never had any trains, so they didn't have any experience of what a train was. So some villagers went to look at the railway station, and they said, oh, a train is a big light, because they saw a light coming, and then they went away. So they thought, okay, the train is light. And then some people stayed on, and they heard a sound, and they saw something visible. They saw the train, and then they went away. And then some people stayed, and they saw that, okay, it's a vehicle and there's passengers. So to the degree or the level of our understanding, we can perceive something higher. And how can we gradually come to that stage where we can perceive something higher is through the process given in the scriptures. So in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, text 34, it says that one should approach a spiritual master, inquire from him submissively, and surrender unto him, because those self-realized souls can impart that knowledge to us. So when we serve those great personalities, and we can recognize those great personalities by reading the books, then we can recognize, just like a medical doctor, they can recognize a certain condition because they have studied it in the medical text, so they can recognize it. So it's not that when we come to spiritual life, then it's all surrender and just become a robot and blind following. No, we need to use our intelligence. Prabhupada, who is very merciful, he came to the West. He was living in India, and he had the perfect life. He had retired in the most holiest of holy places, Vrindavan, and he had rooms there. And at the end of life, one would think that one, just like when someone retires, they want to enjoy and just be peaceful. So in the ancient cultures, we understand that in old age we dedicate our life, and not only in old age but our whole life, to spiritual practices. But in the West, we see sometimes in old age people think they go bowling and then they play cards and then they while away their old age, and who knows what's going to come the next life. Because it's said in the Gita texts, the wisdom texts, that at the end of life, whatever one remembers at the end of life, that form he will attain. Like I think there's also some movies made where someone became a dog in his next life because he was thinking of his dog. So one may think, oh, so cute, I can be a dog. But you don't know if you're going to be a dog in China where they eat dogs, some places. So we have to consider, we have to think and use our intelligence that where do I want to go? Even in material life, we're not just hanging around and, waiting. We need to see what's happening and where we want to go. There has to be some goal. If there's no goal, then everything is dry and you can't attain any purpose in life. Everyone has some purpose, and we all need to find our purpose and dovetail it in the service of the Lord. So that is the nature of the spark as a servant of the Lord. So here Prabhupada mentions in Bhagavad Gita 7.5, where Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, it's going on a battlefield, and it's not like, the warrior Arjuna, he's fighting a battle on behalf of the Lord for a good cause, to bring in the rulership of saintly king who is God conscious. Because when we have a good leader, then that leader can guide all the dependents in engaging their nature to serve God, to serve Krishna, and then also at the same time engaging their nature so that they are peaceful while they're living in the material world. So every one of us, we have different needs, different degrees of needs, but we have all basic needs. We all have a need for love and, food, shelter, clothing, water. And then we need to find what our nature is. Some people like gardening, so they do gardening and they pick flowers for the Lord, make garlands. Some people like cooking, so they engage their cooking propensity to cook for the Lord, and that is offered to the Lord and it becomes blessed food. And then we eat that blessed food and our heart and our mind becomes purified. So that's why as Hare Krishnas, we are instructed to eat only Krishna Prasadam, which is blessed food offered to Krishna. Because just like there are scientific studies made of water, if you just maybe Google it, you can find out scientific studies on water where they expose the water to different vibrations. I think Panu Swami, when he was a few years ago, he came to Auckland and he gave that class about, there was a study made on water, and they played rock music and they played classical music, and the molecules of if you look under the magnifying glass, they were all distorted when there was like rock, hardcore music. And then when they played very classical and calm music, you could see actual beautiful patterns, symmetrical patterns. So also there's studies done on plants, if you also want to Google that, where they play different music, and then the plants, they don't grow as much. Or even with cows, I've heard that there's a research done on cows. When they play calming music or they're singing to the cow, then the cow tends to give more milk. So just like that, there's a scientific reason for everything. So we need to use our intelligence and see what we are exposing ourselves to. And also it is instructed in the Vedic text that we need to associate with devotees. Devotees meaning that those who are practicing this process. And we may not be pure, no one is pure. Prabhupada is a pure devotee, and he did say, I was reading There's a lecture on Bhagavad Gita 2, 1 to 10, and a talk in Los Angeles on the 25th of November 1968. So Srila Prabhupada is saying, so far we do, that is pure. So pure devotee does not mean one has to become immediately cent%. But if one sticks to the principle that will follow a pure devotee, then his actions are, he is as good as a devotee. So we have to follow the footprints of the pure devotees, great souls. So that's why the important verse in Bhagavad Gita 4:34, it says, approach the spiritual master, inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. So inquiring submissively means that that's showing that we're not following blindly, but we inquire that, oh, I don't understand this aspect of it. Why is that? Why do we do this? And also rendering menial service. In the material world, we see that no one wants to do menial service. Everyone wants to be the boss and to be in charge of everyone. But the secret to making progress on the spiritual path is to serve those great devotees. Because by serving them, they are very humble. They're not thinking that, oh, I'm receiving this service. Just like in the morning we are doing Guru Puja, so worshipping the spiritual master. So Srila Prabhupada, he actually taught us this. So we would think, why is he teaching his disciples to worship him? Does he think he's such a big devotee? No, he's the most humble person. Once one person, when he was giving a talk in a public place, then one person says, so you think you are great? And then he says, no, I am 5th class. I'm the servant of everybody. So when someone is a leader, just like a teacher and a parent, you're teaching your child manners. You say thank you and please. But the parent doesn't, care whether the child says thank you or please. The parent, the father, mother, the teacher, loves the child unconditionally, wants to teach them values for their benefit. They don't care if they, not that they don't care, but it doesn't make a difference to them whether the child, is listening to them or not, because their love is unconditional. But then obviously the choices the child makes, then that is what the result one will gain. So Srila Prabhupada, he came and he's teaching us this Guru Puja, and in his heart, when he's singing, just like my spiritual master, Bhakti Krishna Goswami, he says, when we do Guru Puja, like when it's their appearance day, their birthday, then we have a special ceremony to honor them and to show our gratitude to them. But he's also singing the prayers that he's singing because he's passing on those prayers to his spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada is not accepting that honor for himself. He's passing it on to his spiritual master. And his spiritual master is passing it on to his spiritual master. And it goes all the way up to Krishna. So it's not that one is accepting that honor, just like a teacher. Maybe not so much now, but in the old days when we were growing up, and even before that, we would really respect the teacher. We would stand up when the teacher enters the classroom. We would greet the teacher and show them honor. There's a spiritual science involved where bhakti or devotion to God comes from the heart. So bhakti is transferred from the heart of a devotee to the heart of another devotee. So that's why the key to making progress in spiritual life is to serve the devotees and just try to inquire submissively and remain in the association of devotees, and just understand that our nature is servant, so we can choose to be a servant of material nature where we go out in the world, we can work, and then at the end of the week some people may go out to the nightclub or enjoy, maybe not so much now because of COVID, or we can work hard and then do the same thing that a materialist is doing, buying food, having a car and everything, but you engage that, you cook that food. Your home can be a temple. You cook that food, you offer to the Lord in your home. You have an altar at home, you offer that and you become blessed, and you chant the holy names of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So just read the translation again. The Lord is like a great blazing fire, and the living entities are small sparks of that fire. So we'll end there. If anyone has any questions or comments or corrections, or even if you have any question with regard to anything else that we do in our practice, you're welcome to ask.
Last question. This idea of the living entities being subservient to the Supreme Being, because in the material world your servant is considered quite native, like dog. So can you talk about the benefits and the natural happiness that you get from being subservient to the Supreme Being rather than trying to become the Supreme Joy yourself?
Okay. So, the Prabhupada states here, just as a big fire and the spark are both have the power to burn, the burning power of the fire and that of the spark are not the same. So when the spark falls out of the fire, there's no enjoyment. So if we disconnect from God, from Krishna, then we just die and we become just like a spark. The cinder comes out of the fire and it becomes black and burnt out like ashes. So I'll also just mention about something what you said. It reminded me of one of Srila Prabhupada's disciples. His name is Vaisheshika Prabhu, and he was talking about yes, we are functioning in the material world, and we are all aspiring devotees. We're trying to serve the Lord, and we all conditioned. We're not perfect, and sometimes we also make mistakes. But we get up just like a child. He's learning to walk and he falls down and gets bruises and he is bleeding. But the child, doesn't give up, and the parent doesn't give up on the child that, oh, you fell and you stay down. No, we keep getting up, and then eventually one day we'll walk. So in the material world, we're also functioning in the material world. So a devotee, like at ISKCON Silicon Valley, there are many people also who are working out in the corporate world. So it's not that one is, humility is not something, the misconception some people have of humility is that, oh, I bow down to you, I'm just like, Humility can also not be visible in that external expression of, oh, I'm bowing down. Humility means I am a servant of God. Just like in Lord Ram's pastime, Lord Ram is an incarnation of Lord Krishna in the previous age. And he has a great servant called Hanuman. He's a monkey god. And Hanuman, he's the most humble servant of God. But do we see him as like someone who's meek or who's weak? No, he's very strong and powerful. And one speaker years ago, he was talking about how when this great demoniac person, he kidnapped the wife of Lord Ram, Sita, and then Hanuman was going to look for Mother Sita, and he went to to Lanka, and then he burnt down that whole Ashoka forest, and then he went on the highest building and he started roaring and saying, I am Hanuman, servant of Lord Ram. So if one is doing that, would one sometimes in the material world consider that to be humble? But that's humility. So as we are functioning in the material world, we need to also use our intelligence, and sometimes we need guidance. Just like one of the great teachers in our line, Narada Muni, this great sage who can travel, he has the mystic power to travel both in the spiritual and material worlds. He has many disciples, and also disciples from different species, you can imagine. So he had one disciple, because by hearing the pastimes of the Lord and the holy name, the heart of any living entity becomes purified. Even when we're chanting, the living entity, the trees, they're also spirit souls covered in a tree body, and the insects and bugs, they're also hearing this sound vibration, and they're also becoming purified. So the snake had heard from Narad Muni and he became purified. And then so the children in that village realized that, oh, the snake is no more biting us. So they started throwing stones at it and making fun of it. And then Narad Muni came to visit his disciple in the body of a snake, the cobra, and he says, oh, people are attacking me. And he says, did I say that you don't show your hood? So it doesn't mean humility means, like that. You also need to show your hood, not that you're going to strike. So in the material world, we need to function as well. There are corporate leaders who have a very high position. So they can't say, oh, I am your servant to their people who are working under them, because they are servant in their heart. So there's two lives the devotee is living, the internal life and the external life. So externally, it may be functioning, giving orders to everyone, but internally is understanding that I am a servant of God, I am a servant of Krishna, and I'm also serving under this management, this company, so I'm doing my duty in that way. So when we're doing that, then we are successful and we're not separated. But if one starts thinking that I am an independent boss and I'm the controller, then one starts thinking, becomes proud and starts mistreating the employees, or even if one doesn't mistreat the employees, one starts thinking I'm the doer. And there's a saying, English saying, pride comes before the fall. So if we separate ourselves from God, from Krishna, the spark separates from the fire, then there's no enjoyment. So anything else anyone would like to? Thank you very much. Shri Caitanya Caritamrita ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai, all the Vaishnavas, Vrinda ki jai.